Hello, my name is Cedar Grendon. If you don't know me, I am a junior here at BHS. So far in this presentation, you have seen the more historical side of colonization, and so now I'd like to talk about a more modern perspective. I am Native American. I'm a member of the Soxhawtl Indian tribe, which is located just outside of Darrington. And so for a more modern perspective, I would like to share my story, but first I would like to share with you all the story and knowledge of my mother.
My name is Christina Grendon. I am a member of the Soxhawtl Indian tribe. Colonization is kind of the destruction of a people, or at least the destruction of a people in the way that that they had always known to be. One of the most deliberate and prominent pieces of that were boarding schools. And then as time went on, and these techniques of like boarding schools, they, I don't want to say they weren't working, but they were realizing that they couldn't take those children and place them there anymore, just because of the way that society was going. They were finding other ways to impose that colonization. One of those was adopting Native children out. So what that means is that finding any reason that they could to remove Native children from their homes, and take them from their parents. Sometimes it was warranted, a lot of times it wasn't. Here in the United States, that was referred to as the Adoption Project. In Canada, it's known as the 60s Scoop. And it was a way to take Native children from their homes and place them with non-Native families to be raised. This was actually a really good method of colonization because it was yet another way that they were able to strip identities, remove that culture, and continue to conform Native people to this colonial settler way of life. So how do I know that it worked? Well, I know that it worked because both of my parents were adopted out. My mother was left on the Lummi Reservation. She was fortunate enough to be taken in by a Lummi family and adopted by a Lummi family. And so her Native way of life wasn't impacted so much, because she still grew up in a culture. It wasn't her culture because she comes from a different place, but it was still a Native culture. But my dad, he was, him and his 5 siblings, they were taken by the state, taken away from their dad, and they were eventually adopted out into a non-Native family and were forced to forget everything that they had learned up until that point. They were really impacted, and subsequently that impacted me. So my dad was 10 when that happened. He was about 10, and you're growing up and you're learning how to live a certain way, and then all of a sudden you have to switch and you have to go in this direction, and you have to start learning to be a whole different person. And that's exactly what happened, with my dad and his siblings. And because of that, there were pieces that got lost. there was family that wasn't known. For Native people, we build our identity through our families, and we build our culture through our families, and we have certain things that belong to us, and it's how we know who we are.
One really harmful construct of colonization that has affected me personally is blood quantum. If you don't know what that is, blood quantum is basically how much native blood do you have. Blood quantum was introduced as like a prerequisite to be able to join a tribe. Like you have to be this much native to join a tribe. Fun fact, the only other living beings on this earth that have to prove how much of some sort of blood they have are dogs and horses. Not other people, dogs and horses. And basically the idea was that after so many generations, there wouldn't be any native people with enough native blood to enroll in tribes. Now, when the US government put this into place, they couldn't have imagined that there'd still be Native Americans today. Like, they truly thought that this construct of colonization was going to be so affected that there would be none left. Side note, the reason they did not want any natives to be left is because if there were no natives left, they would not have to honor any more of the treaties, they would not have to pay any of the reparations. The whole idea of blood quantum can be very damaging for Native Americans because if you have less blood quantum, you can feel like you're lesser than, that you are less native. And that's how it was for me. I used to put so much stock in my blood quantum. It kind of comes down to the fact that I'm a white passing native. Like, you wouldn't look at me and say, oh, they're native, because I don't look native. Like, there is no one native look, and that is one of the harmful things perpetuated by colonization and perpetuated by mascots. Tying it back. But because I don't, quote unquote, look native, having that little number that says, I'm this much native, used to be a really big deal to me. But it was very much a two-sided coin, because in the Western world, that number was how I proved to everyone else that, hey, I'm native and I can be proud of this. But then in my native world, it made me feel like I wasn't enough. It made me feel like I was lesser than, because it is much less than other natives, especially natives that, like, quote unquote, look native. And it made me feel like I didn't belong. And there wasn't a single person in my family or out on the res that ever did anything to make me feel that way, because they didn't care about the number. They just cared that I showed up and that I was there. But that little number, it made me feel like I wasn't enough, that I wasn't native enough, that, because it was so small, like, I don't deserve to engage in my culture. I don't deserve to learn any of this stuff. And that's just not the case. That stupid little number doesn't matter, because no matter what, I am Native American. And my experience is not a unique one. There are plenty of Native Americans who feel like this. But, as was said at the beginning of the presentation, this is not meant to guilt you. This is meant to make you aware. This is meant to educate you. The changes we are making now are about acknowledging the past, decolonizing our present, so that we can all move forward into the future.